Some of the most powerful card effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are locked behind a discard cost. And in this video, we'll be going over the absolute worst cards in the game that take a card out of your hand to work. And starting us off at number 10, we have Spirit Ryu. This is a level 4 Wind Dragon with 1000 attack and defense, and during the battle phase, if this card battles, you can discard one dragon monster to make this card gain another 1000 attack and defense until the end of the battle phase. This is a tiny 1000 attack monster you're meant to use as a beater by discarding something, when you could just be playing something that's bigger by default instead. Except this card is even worse than that, since the effect can only be triggered during your battle phase, making it a sitting duck during your opponent's turn. The only benefit this card has over those other ones is that his effect is not once per turn, so you could discard multiple dragons for an even bigger boost. But why would you ever want to go -2 or worse to get a high attack monster when pretty much every removal spell will do the same job but better? Even for this card's time, a generic discard cost would usually impact the field much more, such as Tribe Infecting Virus or Raigeki Break, while this card does much less while also requiring specifically a dragon. Still, due to being a really old card, and because lots of dragons do want to be in the graveyard, this card only gets the 10th spot on this list. And at number 9, we have Geomancer of the Ice Barrier. This is a level 3 spellcaster tuner with 800 attack and 1200 defense, and it lets you, once while it's face up on the field, discard one card and declare one attribute. Then this card cannot be targeted by attacks with the monsters of the declared attribute. Now, the first wave of main deck Ice Barrier monsters were notoriously bad when compared to their extra deck counterparts, and Geomancer was no exception. When this card came out, tuners which could protect themselves did have some value, such as Krebons and Full Helm Knight being able to negate attacks. Even within that niche, Geomancer is not very good, since all of them had their protection with negligible costs, and would work on all attributes without a discard. Most decks also lean towards tuners that could special summon themselves. Still, despite all these issues, this card is still an easily searchable tuner, so at least a Hal can save it from being completely useless. The new Ice Barrier support allows you to search it from your deck if you need a level 3 tuner for synchro plays, even if there's another better monster you could be running instead. And at number 8, we have Flying Red Carp. This is a level 4 water fish monster with 500 attack and defense. It can, as a quick effect, discard one water monster to gain 500 attack permanently. Then, if it ever destroys something by battle, it can tribute itself to special summon a fish, sea serpent, or aqua monster from your hand or deck. Cheating out monsters from your deck is by no means a bad effect, but this card really makes you work for it. There are some actually pretty good targets for it, such as King Coelacanth, who can special summon 4 fish monsters from your deck, being the main enabler of old fish OTK decks. The issue is that it's pretty much impossible to get this effect off, especially considering the year this card was released. Realistically, you're not beating over anything with this unless you're playing cards to boost it further, something that has been out of the meta for several years, and you'd probably need at least a discard on top of it. Still, this card has a small bit of utility solely due to being a water monster that can discard monsters as a quick effect. This means it can be used to trigger Atlantean monsters during your opponent's turn, monsters which trigger their effects when used as a cost to activate a water monster's effect. So you could, for example, discard Atlantean Heaven Infantry to disrupt your opponent's turn with a pop, even if this job of Flying Carp is heavily outclassed by other water monsters who could do the same thing. And at number 7, we have Radiant Vouirescence. This is a level 4 light dragon with 1600 attack, and it has the effect that when you normal summon this card while your opponent controls a monster, you can discard one card to send any number of other copies of itself from your deck to the graveyard. Then, while in the graveyard, you can make it be treated as a dark monster until the end of your turn. This card's second effect is a worse version of the Elemental Sabers, who were not very good themselves in the TCG, even if they were meta in Duel Links. Radiant is obviously meant to be used as a chaos enabler of sorts, since it can put dark and light in your graveyard for something like Blackluster Soldier, which used to see tons of play in the past. If only this card had been released a decade or so earlier, it could have been used in chaos decks to turbo out BLS and Chaos Sorcerer. However, it came out in 2021. Where the only chaos monsters that were seen play were searchable and only needed their deck's regular combos as setup. None of these would ever need to be ran alongside a monster which required a discard, your normal summon, and your opponent to control something. But at least Light Level 4 Dragon is a really fortunate typing, so you can just link this off into something better. And at number 6, we have number 58, Burner Visor. This is a rank 4 Xyz monster with 1000 attack and defense, and can be made with any 2 level 4 monsters. It has the same kind of effect as a Union monster, where it can either equip itself to an Xyz monster you control or special summon from the spell and trap card zone once per turn. The monster it's equipped to gains the ability to attack directly, and also if it inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can discard one card to inflict 500 damage to them. Burner Visor is clearly meant to be used as a finisher of sorts, allowing you to attack directly for lethal with another Xyz monster you control. This would have been fine if the rank 4 engine did not have about a dozen better options who would allow you to push for damage while also providing way more utility. Burner Visor asks for more than its counterparts since it needs you to have another Xyz monster out in the first place to work, while also letting your opponent trade 2 for 1 if the monster it's equipped to gets destroyed. But the worst part is that the discard cost attached to it is only a minuscule 500 burn effect, when you can easily burn for more without losing any hand advantage using Gagaga Cowboy. And at number 5, we have Glacial Aqua Madoor. This is a level 6 water monster with 1200 attack and 3000 defense. It has 2 effects. The first is a hand trap effect that at the start of the damage step, if your normal monster is battling, you can reveal a Glacial Aqua Madoor from your hand and discard 1 card to protect it from battle destruction. The second one activates while it's on the field, where if it battles another monster, it lets you reveal a normal monster in your hand to destroy the monster at the beginning of the damage step if you then discard another card. Aqua Madoor was notable for being one of the better statted 2000 walls in early Yu-Gi-Oh, but its Glacial Retrain is unremarkable in every way possible. The first effect is a way worse version of many other battle-related hand traps, which didn't really see any play themselves, but it asked for a discard on top of it. Being technically reusable doesn't make this card much better. It doesn't actually address the opponent's threat in any way. The on-field effect is way better since it's essentially El Shaddai construct, but the really obtuse cost of needing to get this high-level monster on the field first makes it even harder to pull off, plus it also has a discard cost as well. Normal monster support has only gotten better over the years, giving you little reason to run this over anything else. And at number 4, we've got Return to the Doomed. This is a normal spell that lets you discard 1 monster to add 1 monster that was destroyed by battle this turn from your graveyard to your hand. These kinds of generic recovery from the graveyard effects are actually quite rare, and quite a few of them have seen play at some point. The problem with Return is that on top of being a -1 instead of card neutral or plus like the previous cards, it doesn't do what it's supposed to. You're meant to use this card to return one of your monsters that was destroyed by battle to the hand, but it only works on a monster that's been destroyed the turn it was activated, and it's a normal spell. So this only works if you're crashing your monsters into your opponents for some reason. Now, that's not the most uncommon thing in the world, since you can lose a battle due to your opponent's card effects. You could also be crashing one of your recruiter monsters and make them float into something from the deck. In either case, getting them back to the hand isn't the worst thing in the world. But you wouldn't be able to use them into your next turn, since the effect only happens during the end phase for some reason. You'd be much better off running cards that can add the monster back to your hand immediately, or just summon it out instead. And at number 3, we have VW Tiger Catapult. This is a fusion light machine monster with 2000 attack and 2100 defense. It must first be special summoned by banishing a V Tiger Jet and a W Wing Catapult you control from your field. And its effect is that you can discard 1 card to target an opponent's monster and change its battle position. The V and W pieces were meant to complete the XYZ archetype, but despite coming out years later, they still managed to be worse than those. These still had the issue of the XYZ monsters, where one of the parts was a vanilla, so it wouldn't work with the little unit support that they did have at the time, except V was even worse statted than X for some reason. They also gave VW the tiniest stats out of any of the other 2 pieces, while also having the worst effect out of all of them. All the other pieces have the effect discard 1 card to destroy a certain type of card in the field, and these could actually clear a board due to not being once per turn. VW Tiger Catapult's effect is not worth a single discard to be used once, much less multiple times. It doesn't trigger flip effects at the very least, so it could be useful for playing against a flip monster, but even in that aspect it's straight up worse than YZ Tank Cannon that destroys them instead. To put the final nail in the coffin, the original pieces did get a few pieces of modern support specifically meant for it, while the VW ones were pretty much forgotten instantly after. And at number 2, we have Little Fairy. This is a level 3 light monster with only 800 attack and defense, and it has the effect that up to twice per turn you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard to increase this card's level by 1. Level modulation effects are rarely ever good at Yu-Gi-Oh by themselves, but doubly so when they want a cost as high as 1 card from your hand for each one. In every case where monsters that change their levels ever saw play, they'd allow you to gain advantage while doing so, not lose it. During the Xyz era, a Heartbeat Channeler would let you special summon a monster from your deck and change its level for rank 7 plays. The Mythic Dragons could be brought out of the field easily and give you access to the much wanted rank 8 pool. Little Fairy gives you access to the rank 3, 4, and 5 pools, which had tons of better options that wouldn't be eating up your hand. In the anime, this card was used to make Fairy Cheer Girl, which is a rank 4 that requires Fairy-type monsters and can draw you a card. But even then, you'd just be making up for the card you had to pitch in the first place. And finally, at number 1, we've got Curse of Aging. A normal trap that, for a discard, reduces the attack and defense of all monsters your opponent currently controls by 500 points until the end of the turn. This card came out in the game already outclassed since Reinforcements was released earlier and offered almost the same utility, but without a discard cost. Even that had already gotten pushed out by Rush Recklessly before Curse of Aging was a thing to make matters even worse. Cards that only modify stats for a single turn have generally not been very good in Yu-Gi-Oh! Outside of the first few formats, since most of the time you get more utility out of simple battle traps like Sakuretsu Armor. The decks that ran those were usually Gadgets and Gladiator Beasts. Gadgets because these decks maxed out in all forms of removal due to their tiny monsters, and sometimes a card like that was just the 3rd or 4th best removal spell to play. Gladiator Beasts would want to play those because they actually need battles to occur for their effects to go off. Even in these two cases, Rush Recklessly would soon be replaced by Shrink, the next card to power creep this sort of effect. Seeing how quickly cards that were way better than Curse of Aging got pushed out of the meta just highlights how little of a reason you ever had to run it. Even in Duel Links, a game in which battle traps have been meta for far longer, you never had a reason to run this since Reinforcements came out in the same pack. Basically, all the other alternatives had better effects and didn't require a discard in order to use them. So that's why Curse of Aging is the least impactful trap with a discard cost you could ever put in your deck in any format that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has ever had, and why it's number 1 on this list. Alright, and that's the list. If you happen to know of any other terrible cards that require a discard or have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below.